Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, today with a dual review, I guess, of King's Ransom by Ed McBain and the movie High and Low by Akira Kurosawa. I did not intend for this to be a dual review. I wasn't even planning on doing a video on King's Ransom. I haven't really done single reviews of the 87th Precinct books yet, but once I started reading this, it became immediately apparent to me that, oh my god, this was adapted into a movie by one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, Akira Kurosawa. And I had no idea. Because it's been forever since I'd seen High and Low. I watched it back in college. And even though I own the Criterion edition of it, I hadn't ever actually read the booklet inside that talks about the history of it. I never looked into it. And lo and behold, it's been 15 years, 10 years later, however long, and I'm on an Ed McBain binge discovering how great his books are. And it turns out he and one of my favorite directors are connected in some way. So I thought what I would do here is the first part of this video is going to be a standard book review of this, non-spoilery. And then at the midway point, I'll shift to talk about the movie and explain the different ways that Kurosawa approaches the story, the different way he did it from McBain. And with that, I'll have to talk about spoilers to do so. So I'll make you aware of that when that comes in. But first, let's just talk about King's Ransom. So let's start with the plot, because I think that this is a perfect plot. I think it is for a suspense thriller. I don't know that I've ever seen a plot that is a better idea than this. So what it is Douglas King is making a power play at the shoe company where he's like an executive. He's made some deals. He's mortgaged everything he can mortgage, taken out loans to gain controlling stake in this shoe company that he worked from the ground up in, from the mailroom or the factory, whatever. So he's making this big coup, and to continue to do that, it would basically cost every dollar that he has against all these loans, but he'll get it back once he's president of the company. As he's about to do that, he cuts the check and he hands it to his assistant to deliver. He gets a call from kidnappers, basically saying, "We kidnapped your son, and the ransom is this exorbitant amount. It's basically a little bit less than what the actual check that he just cut was." Effectively, paying the ransom would ruin him, and he's ready to do so until his son shows up and is like, "Hey, I can't find my friend anywhere. Have you seen him?" And what it turns out happened is the kidnappers grabbed the wrong kid. They actually grabbed Douglas King's chauffeur's son, who is similar height, similar age, similar hair color. So they grabbed the wrong kid. But once they realize that, they still demand the ransom. So then you have this moral dilemma for Douglas King of, do you pay this ransom that will ruin you completely to save the life of a child that is not yours? And it's brilliant. It is so tense, and it's so expertly handled by Ed McBain, because this is not black and white. To some people, it might be. It's just of course you have to pay it. But everyone that says that are the people who don't stand to become impoverished from it. It's everyone on the outside looking in. Douglas King doesn't know. He has to think about it, because he's worked his entire life to get to this point. And what McBain does is every chapter there's this push and pull where it's you don't think he should pay the ransom. You agree that he shouldn't, and then you agree that he should, and then you agree that he shouldn't, and then you agree that he should, and it keeps going back and forth on who is right, because there's a lot to consider, and to me it's not a complete black and white. What's interesting about this book is that of the 87th Precinct books I've read, this is the one that spends the least amount of time with the actual police officers. The moral dilemma, the ethical dilemma, is front and center here. It is not like there is the usual police procedural investigation stuff where they do forensics tests and they pull tire tracks and paint samples and whatever, but that's just kind of woven in there in between the scenes of Douglas King deciding, like having to figure this out. And at the same time, we're also spending time with the kidnappers. And there's a parallel there because Douglas King has a wife who can't believe that he's even questioning whether or not to pay the life and to pay the ransom. She thinks like you're going to kill this child if you go through with this, or if you don't pay the ransom. And on the kidnapper side, one of the kidnappers has a wife who didn't know what was going on, and so she is mad at her husband for what he's done to put another child's life in danger. So you have these two completely opposite ends of the experience where in both cases the wife is like furious with the husband over like what they're thinking about doing. So it creates an interesting parallel, and it's that parallel, it's that juxtaposition that Kurosawa really leans into for his movie, and I'll get into that. Um, and it's a short book. Like I said, doesn't spend a lot of time on the investigation. It's really quickly paced, very tightly paced, and it just maximizing the dramatic tension of the plot. And for that reason, I love this book. I honestly, could you make a book like this where you spend more time with the characters and have them go through different character arcs and learn things and all that? You could do that, but I wouldn't sacrifice the just tight pacing of this for that. I think this works perfectly as it is. I give this book a 10 out of 10 arbitrary and subjective grade. That's how much I liked it. I loved this book. I thought it was so much fun and so hard to put down. It was just so tense. And now we're going to talk about the movie and how Akira Kurosawa improves on McBain's idea for the purposes of the visual film medium. So at this point, I'm going to be mentioning spoilers for both the movie and the book because I can't talk about the comparison without doing so. Now, film is a visual medium. We can't get around that. There's talking, there's sound, but what makes it special is that it is a visual medium that can be controlled with careful, specific camera decisions, lighting decisions, character movement. Like you can't really do that with any other medium. And Akira Kurosawa is maybe the best to ever just know how to compose a shot in a meaningful way. I think his movie Seven Samurai is unbelievably gorgeous, and that's a kind of movie where you can freeze it at any frame and you can find a beautiful painting. High and Low is different than that. High and Low isn't quite like that because it's not as picturesque. This isn't a samurai movie. Akira Kurosawa was known for his samurai movies. This is a contemporary movie. It takes place in at the time modern day Japan, but it's no less thoughtfully and incredibly composed. There are so many just shots in this movie that just linger and that know exactly where to sit and have the characters move in ways that are meaningful. Like a character motion you don't think of as being meaningful, but the way that these characters like have their backs to each other, the way that the Douglas King character played by Toshiro Maifune is constantly separating himself from everybody else is so meaningful. Like this is a widescreen format film, and it uses the whole screen. So you'll have a bunch of characters in the foreground left, and then King will be in the background right, or he'll be in the deep background in the shadows. Everyone else will be in the foreground, or vice versa. Like character placement is very, very important to Kurosawa, and there's a reason that this movie is called High and Low in English. In original Japanese, it's actually called Heaven and Hell, and it's because the part of McBain's book that Kurosawa latched onto is the relationship between the haves and the have-nots, the disparity of wealth, and the way that that can inspire um, a crime like this. Because Douglas King's home is very visibly on a hill overlooking what is basically like not maybe not quite a slum, but a dirty city that is getting worse. And there are slums within it, and that's where like the kidnapper in the movie spends a lot of his time there and like spends time with those people, and he himself feels that he's been wronged and he never got what he really deserved, and so he looks at that house on the hill and he just wants to topple it. But when you hear that, you might think that this is like an eat the rich kind of movie. It's not, because what Kurosawa does in here, different from the book, is that Douglas King has a character arc in this movie. He doesn't in the book. In the book, he decides to not pay the ransom, and he gets lucky, and they catch the kidnappers, save the kid. He gets to retain his wealth, and he becomes the president. In this book, he pays the ransom, loses the money, at least temporarily, but he loses his job, and like his power play fails, and he's not ruined at the end, but his position is lowered, his station is lowered, and he embraces it. And we find that he has a humanity inside of him that was missing from the Ed McBain book. So the Kurosawa movie is more hopeful, and talking about how it's sometimes the people that you look at as above you, and you will project onto them this idea that they think they are better than you. But he proposes that when given the opportunity, they can make the right decision, and they can take the financial hit for the morally correct reason. And there's an unbelievable, beautiful moment in the movie where, after King has decided to pay the ransom, the police are trying to figure out how to rig the briefcases with the money so that there's like these like smoke capsules in them. And King does it himself, where he takes the case and he says, "I worked, on the factory floor, working shoes. I did cases as well, and he gets it, so I can do this." And he gets his old toolkit that he hasn't touched probably in decades. And he sits on the floor in front of everybody, and he gets to work doing it. It is an incredible, beautiful, meaningful moment. And it's something that is definitely not present here. There's not a lot of beautiful, meaningful moments in this. This is just a very tense ride from beginning to end. And I think the ending for the book makes more sense for McBain's fictional city, because the whole point of the 87th Precinct is that the city is full of people who are only looking out for themselves, and the rich get richer, the poor stay poor, and nothing ever changes. So Ed McBain's ending works. It's not a bad ending, even though I kind of like this one like more for emotional reasons. It's a great ending for the world that Ed McBain has created. And Kurosawa says, that's not my world. My world is one that is more hopeful. Mine is a world where people will make the right decision when given the opportunity. And I think that's wonderful. And just about the movie itself, I think that the first hour of this movie is one of the best movies ever made. I think there's more suspense in here than any Alfred Hitchcock movie I've ever seen. Alfred Hitchcock's the master of suspense. I've never felt suspense the way that I felt watching the first hour of this. It's a bit of a long movie. It's a little too long. So what happens is, in the first hour of this, that covers basically the entire book, with the exception of like the police stuff. So all of this, the first hour of this takes place in one room. It takes place in the Douglas King's living room, and we stay there for like the whole time until he leaves the house to go drop off the ransom money. We're in that room, very claustrophobic. And then the last hour and a half of the movie is the police stuff of them tracking down the kidnapper and trying to get the money back. And that's all really good. It's very well done. But that first hour is really where Kurosawa shines, hour and 20 minutes. So I highly recommend the movie. I think it's absolutely exceptional. It's on HBO Max right now, if you have that in the US. If you want to find a way to watch it, do so. I love the movie and I love this book. Both of them work really well, and it proves my point about how perfect this plot is, because that central dilemma is handled in two completely different ways in these two projects, and yet both still work really, really well. So kudos to McBain for coming up with it. Kudos to Akira Kurosawa for making it his own and doing something absolutely spectacular with it. I hope you read this book. I hope you watch this movie. Let me know if you have already in the comments and what your thoughts about them are. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.